The Prime Minister has presented Israel with an ultimatum tonight. If it fails to meet certain conditions to end the suffering in Gaza, Britain will recognise a Palestinian state in September. Sir Keir Starmer has been under growing pressure from Labour MPs to act, and his announcement follows that of France last week. Sir Keir spoke in Downing Street after holding an emergency cabinet meeting this afternoon on Gaza.
I can confirm the UK will recognise the state of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution. And this includes allowing the UN to restart the supply of aid and making clear that there will be no annexations in the West Bank.
Well, the government has previously said that recognition of a Palestinian state should come at a point when it can have maximum impact. And today, experts backed by the UN said that the worst-case scenario of famine is playing out in Gaza. Tonight, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the UK's change in position is a reward for Hamas. Well, in a moment, we'll look at how the situation in Gaza has been allowed to develop, and we'll speak to our political correspondent Alex Forsyth and our international editor Jeremy Bowen. But first, our correspondent Hugo Bashega reports on what Gazans are having to endure. He, like all international journalists, is blocked by Israel from entering Gaza and has used material from trusted freelancers there. His report has distressing images from the start.
Watine is 3 months old, a child of a Gaza that's starving. She now weighs less than when she was born. She's weak and tired, her fragile body, skin and bones. Doctors say she's suffering from severe acute malnutrition because of a lack of milk. Yasmin, her mother, is unable to breastfeed every day, herself struggling with hunger. Israel doesn't allow international media, including the BBC, into Gaza. This interview was carried out by a trusted local freelancer working for us.
If I eat, then I have milk for her. But if I don't, there is no milk. There is nothing to drink. There is no food in Gaza.
Some help is coming in. More aid was airdropped today, and supplies are also entering by land. But the UN says Israel is letting in just a fraction of what is needed. In parts of Gaza, this is what getting aid looks like. Desperate crowds stopping convoys to grab whatever they can find. This is a man-made crisis. The UN, aid agencies and even some of Israel's allies have put the blame on Israeli policies, something that Israel denies. There was another warning today from a UN-backed report on hunger. The worst-case scenario of famine is playing out in Gaza.
It's clearly a disaster is unfolding in front of our eyes, in front of our television screens. This is not a warning. This is a call to action. This is unlike anything we have seen in this century.
In Jerusalem, the Israeli foreign minister invited international journalists for a briefing.
President Trump said there is real starvation in Gaza. Do you accept that there is starvation in Gaza?
First of all, it is clear that after almost 2 years of war, the situation is tough. But there is a lie, and the lie is the starvation policies which the international media, including BBC, is cooperating with. And
so you're saying President Trump is lying?
Don't disturb me. You asked. I respect that, and now it's my turn to answer your question.
He didn't really answer it, but went on to say that Israel was witnessing a distorted campaign of international pressure. Help is still not reaching everyone who needs it in Gaza, and many more are likely to die. Hugo Bashega, BBC News, Jerusalem.
How is it that such suffering has been allowed to happen in Gaza in the last few weeks of a war that started in October 2023? Paul Adams looks now at how the aid system to the Gaza Strip broke down.
Aid has been a way of life in the Gaza Strip for more than 70 years. Even before the latest war, 80% of its 2.2 million people relied on it. But the conflict that erupted after the Hamas attacks of October 2023 has brought this profoundly vulnerable population to the brink of starvation. Before the war, aid and commercial goods entered Gaza through 3 main crossing points from Israel and Egypt. Aid was distributed at 400 separate locations run by the UN. But Israel's assault on Hamas has uprooted entire cities and destroyed much of Gaza's civilian infrastructure. With the whole strip falling apart, efforts to feed an increasingly desperate population have often descended into chaos. Nighttime aid convoys overrun, civilians killed and injured. But earlier this year, 6 weeks of hope, a ceasefire, the release of Israeli hostages and a chance for the UN and others to fill Gaza with food. But something else happened too. Hamas took control of some of the newly arrived goods. This is not just an Israeli allegation. Our own sources inside Gaza have confirmed it. Israel, still determined to destroy Hamas, broke the ceasefire, cut off all aid once more. 2.5 months later, with extreme hunger starting to take hold, a whole new distribution system began operating, designed, Israel said, to stop Hamas from stealing aid. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an American organization backed by Israel, hands out food at 4 locations they call secure distribution sites. For many Gazans, that means long, perilous journeys to get the aid through militarized areas. The site's opening hours are unpredictable and short. There's confusion and overcrowding. GHF says it's provided close to 100 million meals, but people have to compete with each other and with armed gangs to secure these precious supplies. Hundreds have been killed in the process, most of them by Israeli gunfire. Elsewhere, some aid is flowing, but convoys are regularly ransacked and looted. The only answer, experts say, is to flood Gaza with aid.
If you do this over a sustained period of time, usually less than 2 weeks, the self-distribution stops, the looting stops, you demonetize, decommoditize assistance in the marketplace, if that's where it's going, and you're able to move it successfully.
After 22 months of war, the shadow of starvation is creeping across Gaza. Without a ceasefire, its deadly progress will be hard to stop. Paul Adams, BBC News.
Well, I'm joined by our political correspondent, Alex Forsyth. Alex, just talk us through why the government has potentially decided to recognise a Palestinian state now.
Well, Rita, it is a big shift in the UK government's foreign policy position because until now the Prime Minister has resisted calls, including from many Labour MPs and some in his cabinet, to immediately recognise a Palestinian state, saying it had to be part of a wider peace process and at a point of maximum impact. Now he's saying that will happen in September unless Israel changes course. So it's right to ask, why now? The Prime Minister has clearly been conscious of the domestic political pressure he has been facing, but he's also had to weigh international reaction, not least that from the US President Donald Trump, who Keir Starmer has been carefully cultivating a relationship with. Keir Starmer also spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu before he got his cabinet together to discuss this, and we've since seen the reaction from Israel, saying that this rewards Hamas. Here, it has been welcomed by some Labour MPs, but others have questioned why Palestinian statehood should be conditional on the actions of Israel. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, said this is just political posturing to Labour MPs. It won't bring the hostages home. It won't end the war. Now, on issues like foreign policy, the Prime Minister is seen as fairly naturally cautious, and he will hope that this doesn't prove to be just a symbolic gesture. He said very, very clearly his hope is this will change the situation on the ground. Rita, there is clearly a question as to whether it actually will.
OK. Alex, thank you very much. Let's speak now to Jeremy Bowen, who's in Jerusalem for us. And to Alex's question, will the Prime Minister's announcement make a difference?
He's certainly hoping that it will. And it's a big change in British foreign policy. Make no mistake about that, and intended to be that as well. Now, you notice that the Prime Minister put those conditions on Israel, ceasefire, end the appalling situation, as he put it, in Gaza. And what was really, I think, the deal breaker for the Israelis, because Mr. Netanyahu has already put out this very strong statement saying essentially that Starmer is rewarding Hamas terrorism and that a jihadist state next to Israel would also become a threat to Britain. And the thing that he does not want is that two-state solution. He's adamantly opposed to it, and so are the extremist nationalists in his government who support him. Now, I've spoken to a senior British official who said that because of the way that the Israelis have responded, it has become clear that this process is irreversible. I think you can put money on the fact that Britain will be making that declaration at the UN in September. And their idea, what the British hope, is that they can somehow empower moderates on both sides who will see an alternative to another generation of perpetual warfare between Israelis and Palestinians. And it's also coming in the context of this conference in New York, which has now released a big document with lots of political details about the way forward, including Arab countries condemning the Hamas attacks and saying that they should be disarmed. One thing really interesting as well is that David Lammy, Foreign Secretary in New York, recalled Britain's historical position as once the ruler of this place and its responsibility too. Now, just to sum up, I think that they've often talked about a two-state solution and the idea of it happening, and actually the idea of a window closing. Well, actually, that window closed a long time ago, and this attempt by Britain is to crowbar it open.